Thank you, sir.
Next witness.
Our next witness is Ms. Rushan Abbas.
Sorry. Get more later. But we doesn't matter.
The witness left China in 1989, fearing repercussions from the Chinese Communist Party for her involvement in student activism while studying at the Xinjiang University. Almost 30 years later, in 2018, after the witness spoke about the conditions of the camps in Xinjiang in a panel discussion in Washington, D.C., the witness's sister, a retired medical doctor, and her aunt, who lived in Xinjiang, disappeared. Several months later, her aunt was released, but there was still no information on her sister's whereabouts. Initially, a report in Global Times accused the witness of making her sister up. However, subsequently, the Chinese Foreign Ministry held a press conference where they confirmed that her sister had been sentenced for involvement in terrorist activities. In her statement, the witness also states that many members of her husband's family were arrested for what Chinese authorities designated as excessive religious activities, amongst others. Mrs. Abbas, I have a few questions for you. Firstly, relating to your sister. You state that the Chinese authorities confirmed that your sister, a retired medical doctor, was sentenced for involvement in terrorist activities. Could I ask you, firstly, and if possible, how old your sister was, more or less, when she was arrested for terrorist activities?
Thank you so much. I'm here to speak on behalf of my family, my nieces, and the thousands of more who couldn't be here to speak out. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. My sister, when she was abducted on the middle of September 2018, she was 56 years old, and 6 days from today, she will turn 59.
Thank you for that. And would you know what kinds of activities your sister could have been involved in?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
So the reason for her arrest was terrorist activities, and what kind of activities do you think she might have been involved in?
There is no any kind of evidence or trial. Nothing was given to the family members or other than that, just the Chinese Foreign Ministry claiming on the false accusations. We have no idea. She's a retired medical doctor. She's quiet, non-political, not very active on anything because of health reasons. She's just a very law-binding, quiet person that she was just living very simplistic, normal, ordinary life. So it's all just the accusation against her and against her family if they are accusing her for anything about terrorism-related charges.
And just to clarify and confirm, she was arrested soon after you appeared on a panel discussion speaking about the conditions in the camps.
Yes, on the September 5th, there was a panel on what's happening to Uyghur people today at the Hudson Institute, one of the think tanks in Washington, D.C. And I was on the panel together with Dr. Sean Roberts, actually, and a few other experts. I talked about the conditions of the camps and the genocidal policies that Uyghurs were currently facing since Xinjiang War arrived in August 2016 to our homeland, outlining the fate of my in-laws, which my husband's entire family was missing since April 2017 from Hotan. 6 days after I gave that speech, my sister and my aunt both got abducted on exactly same day. My sister lived in Urumqi, my aunt in Artush, which is a town near Kashgar, 1,400 kilometers, 900 miles away from each other. But those two women picked up exact the same day, 6 days after my speech.
Thank you for that. And my final question, in fact, relates to your in-laws. Now, as you mentioned, many, you said the entire relatives of your husband have been somehow detained or arrested. I'll focus around your younger sister-in-laws who were accused of excessive religious activities and were sent to the camps. And my question to you is, what, in your opinion, does excessive religious activities mean?
The Chinese regime outlawed all simple religious activities like praying, going to mosque, or even practicing like fasting during Ramadan, or for people in Hotan and the Kashgar and the other parts, wearing headscarves, covering their heads. So if there's anything that my sister-in-law is engaged, I'm sure she was probably just covering her hair, because most people in Hotan, Kashgar, they do that. Even as simple as saying Salam Alaikum is being outlawed. So the Chinese regime is claiming the last 4 or 5 years all kind of normal, simple, regular religious activities as illegal Islamic activities, and based on that pretext, they are arresting and taking people to concentration camps and also harshly sentencing them to prison terms.
Thank you for your concise, clear answers. I have no more questions, but the panel may have questions for you, Mr. Abbas. Thank you.
Professor Kaur, please.
Thank you. Just to carry on with the theme of religious activities, is it clear to people in the region what they can do and what they can't do regarding religious activities?
No, I don't believe that they do, because before Xinjiang War, or before 2014, or before Xi Jinping, there were a little bit of time that people able to practice normal religious practices. With the requirement of the Chinese regime, Muhammad Saleh Hajim, a religious scholar, translated Quran per Beijing's request, translated the Quran from Arabic to Uyghur language. And even his work that he has done per the government's request was a crime. He was sentenced to the camp and he died in the camp when he was 80-some years old. All the religious activities before it was allowed by the government, like some people were sent to Mecca for Hajj, and some of them traveled to Turkey or Abu Dhabi, Dubai, UAE, or any kind of like vacation trips with the legal entities like travel agencies that are organized by the government before 2016. They all became their crimes. Any Uyghurs who traveled to Muslim majority countries, they were sentenced harshly for their crimes. I have been traveling around from Japan to Australia, and from Canada to Turkey and Europe, since my sister's abduction, trying to do raising awareness, met thousands of Uyghurs, mothers, children, students, brothers, sisters, looking for their relatives. And their family members are missing because some student in Turkey, his mother came to Istanbul to visit him, and that was her crime, the sentencing harshly. Or if someone was meeting his family in Dubai, vacationing for a week. So anything that before it was normal became the Uyghur people's crimes with Xi Jinping's genocidal policies. So nobody knows what's right and what's wrong anymore.
So at the national level, legally, certain aspects of religion are permitted. Is that correct?
I'm sorry?
At the national level, legally, certain elements of religion are permitted. It's only in this region, and it only pertains to Uyghur and certain other Turkic Muslims. Is that correct?
Yes, in a large extent, which is true. It started with our homeland, and there are people, some activists from New York or some other parts of the world, they always try to excuse the Chinese government's genocidal policies by trying to tell us, oh, we have seen mosques in Xi'an or Beijing or somewhere else that people are still praying. But in our homeland, if anybody who go to mosque to pray, and that's their crimes. So I would agree with you.
So these people who are told that they're criminal would be described as extremists, is that correct? So this is one of the three evils.
Yes.
And when did this begin to happen?
It started when Qin Chuanguo arrived in August in 2016, although it goes back to 2014 actually, when they first built. The first concentration camp was built in Lopnur in 2014. And around that time, they started to exercise shoot at the spot policy. So anyone any kind of law enforcement, for example, a traffic police believes that somebody is running the red light, he or she can shoot that person to kill and no question to be asked. Radio Free Asia did excellent reporting on that, and a few people getting shot and killed, like teenager running the red light with his bicycle or motorcycle, he was killed. And after that, basically, when you look at some of the documents from 2016, Party Secretary Qin Chuanguo, when he delivered China's central government's order of systematic ethnic cleansing, the beginning of this genocide, there is a official Chinese government's documents. It says, quote, must first break their lineage, break their roots, break their connections, and break their origins, basically referring to Uyghur people. So when you look at that, what is that, Those chilling words stated in an internal document reported to the media, from the media to the public. So that explains the intent of eradicating and exterminating the Uyghurs as a genocide that's happening now.
Thank you. Could I talk about your high school classmate's brother, Kaiser Keqing? Is that correct?
Yes.
He was the editor-in-chief of a literary magazine. Mm-hmm. And what happened to him?
I read on the Radio Free Asia article that my friend Qadirdan's brother, Qadirdan Qiyum is my high school classmate and a friend. His brother Kaiser Keqing, he was the editor-in-chief in a literature magazine in Urumqi. When starting from April 2017, when many people were taken to the concentration camps, the conditions of the camps are so bad, he did not want to be taken to the concentration camp. So when the police officers came to get him from his workplace, like before he was being arrested, he was so fearful for that, he jumped out of the 8th floor window, the building, and he killed himself in August 2017.
Why did he think he was going to get arrested or detained?
Well, the reason for that is most of the intellectuals, the thought leaders, and the people who are working on the publishing houses, like editors, they were being targeted. Several years ago, I don't remember exactly when, per the education department's request, Uyghur intellectuals like Yalqin Rozi and Wahidjan Osman and the other several prominent Uyghur intellectuals and scholars worked on the Uyghur textbook, the book that they used for the middle school and high school students. That work was done per the request of the government, and that's being reviewed and checked like every so often, and everything was fine until Chinchuango came over and they changed the rules and the policies. All these intellectuals were sent to prison camps right now. All the people that I mentioned and several more are sentenced harshly. And also prominent scholars like Dr. Raila Dawood and Abdulkadir Jalaluddin, Akhtam Ömer Tashbulatif, Halmurat Ghopor, and my own professor from the university, Sultan Malim, they're all are being targeted because they are the Uyghur intellectuals. I think that's why Kaiser Keqing was being targeted.
Is there anything that they've said or published that could be described as separatist or even terrorist?
No. Actually, there has been a lot of writings on the media about this. It has nothing to do with separatism. It's just the Uyghur literature, with the Uyghur history, with the Uyghur ethnic identities, promoting those. Are those a separatism, when somebody talks about their own culture or their ethnicity or religion? So it's just a way of using the Uyghur ethnicity and the religion to eradicate Uyghur people. And that tells you the ultra-nationalism and the racism from the Chinese Communist Party is using everything against the Uyghur people, dehumanizing them.
And so this order would have come from Party Secretary Chen, or would it have come from the Department of Education in Beijing?
I'm sure that came from Beijing, and the Chinchuango is the person who's delivering in our homeland in East Turkestan.
Okay, thank you. Regarding there are certain reports in the Global Times that I know you might have a stance there, but I'd just like to air them so as I can hear what you have to say. I've come across some reports saying that you work for US intelligence agencies. Why would they say that?
You know where that's coming from? Actually, I thought this might come up as a question, so I printed Zhao Lijuan, who is the Deputy Director of the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This is his official Twitter account. He tweeted with my picture, calling me CIA asset or Guantanamo torturer or worked for Homeland Security. So this is the narrative of the Chinese communist regime to dehumanize me, discredit me for my work. Those are all the Chinese propaganda, calling anyone who opposes the Chinese state propaganda lines with the CIA is a very common tactic. Actually, I believe that recently Sir Jeffrey Nice was also accused by the Chinese state of being UK intelligence asset. So it's just similar targets. And also I'm going to show you another document here. This is, I don't know if you can see, I don't know which camera is focusing on this one. This, the document, this is from the Global Times Network on December 23, 2019. A year before the Chinese regime announced that my sister is so-called terrorist, They printed this media and said, for example, Rushan Abbas, leader of so-called Campaign for Uyghurs, etc., some other things, said from the East Turkestan separatist groups, they first stole some Uyghurs' photos and their information, claimed these people to be missing relatives in Xinjiang, spread rumors in overseas. Well, ever since my sister's abduction, I have been carrying my sister's picture. This is my sister. I am not stealing anybody's photo. I am not taking any other people's information and claiming my missing relatives. This is the picture that I have been carrying when I go to protests, when I go to meetings, and my Twitter handle, everything is my sister's picture. Then, a year later, they came back and they said, my sister, who was abducted since September 2018, that she was sentenced. Wang Wenbin from the Chinese Foreign Ministry named her name, said Rushan Abbas is being charged for such and such.
Okay, can we talk about your other relatives, particularly your husband's 14 nieces and nephews? They're aged between 5 and 22, presumably older now, or is that their age now?
I would say this is their age now, because when I testified back in 2018, when I spoke at the Hudson, they were 2 to 19 years old, so just I added 3 years. So I hope they're alive, and I hope my in-laws are alive, but we don't know. We have no idea who's surviving, who's living, and who's sent to where, who's becoming the victims of the organ harvesting, and which kids sent to which orphanages, or which Chinese family adopted which nephews of us. We have no idea.
So, but their parents are in detention or prison. How do you know that?
My husband last spoke to his mother in April 25th, 2017. And that day, his mother told him not to call her anymore. He didn't call for a couple of weeks, but then he tried to contact them anyway, just to see how they are doing. None of the phones worked. None of the home phones or cell phones, nothing worked. And then he was trying to find out from some distant relatives who are in China proper, in the other parts of China, not in East Turkestan. And everybody said, no one is there anymore. And then later in the summer, my husband found out that from one of the relatives in China proper, in inner China, that my in-laws, my parents-in-laws, and my 3 of my sister-in-laws, their husbands, they all were taken away. And nobody knows where the kids are. And the big family that they all lived together in Laskoi, a neighborhood in Hotan, the door was locked, so basically sealed. And that's it. My husband is here with me right now, and I am witnessing him, unable to sleep, unable to find out anything. And when there is a foreclosure, like some sort of end to it, you can at least say, pray for their being in heaven. But what can you say for something like this? Such an inhumane tragedy that the entire Uyghur people are facing in diaspora. Every person you talk to, everybody say, they count the years, they count the months. This many months, this many years that I have not spoken to my family. I have no idea where they are.
Why would they have been detained? Is this purely due to association with you or association with your husband?
I don't think so. My sister's case, yes, they tried to silence me. They tried to send me a clear message by taking my sister and my aunt 6 days after I spoke. So that started as retaliation. But at the end of it, when you look at it, every single Uyghur is being targeted. The Uyghur intellectuals are being targeted as the thought leaders or anybody who can lead or produce the culture or and my sister being a intellectual, she was a trained medical doctor. If it wasn't for me, I'm sure as an Uyghur, as all the Uyghurs are being targeted, I don't know. I have seen the clear messaging from the Chinese government as a hostage taking of my husband's family and my sister. But at the same time, all these other people's families are also disappearing when they are not engaged with any kind of human rights activities. And they are unable to come out and speak. They are unable to give testimony like ourselves because they fear, because they worry for their other relatives. If the mother and the father disappear, they have siblings. If the siblings disappear, they have aged mother and the fathers. They look at me as an example, and the amount of the work that I have done on social media, the amount of vocality that I was doing to bring up my sister's case. Now my niece joined me, my sister's daughter, and there is no information on my sister's whereabouts. Many people are afraid of coming out and speaking and testifying.
So there is guilt by association, and part of that is to do with the fact that you're abroad. Can I just clarify with you, Uyghur people who go abroad are a threat, whereas Han people who go abroad are not a threat? Is that correct?
Well, I cannot speak for the Han people, but for the Uyghurs, yes. They feel that when the Uyghurs go abroad and educated, especially in the West, we learned the Western democracy and we start to see the oppression and all the genocidal policies the Chinese regime is conducting against our people. So we demand to be respected. We demand the dignity of the humans, and we demand people to pay attention to China's crimes against humanity. So maybe that's why.
My final question is about your health. You write about it in your report. Could you elaborate on your mental and physical health?
My sister's, you mean?
Your health. You talk about your husband and your health.
Thank God, we are healthy. We are able to travel and raise awareness. But emotionally, how can you be? When your people facing genocide with the intent of completely exterminating your people. I am the youngest in my family, and my dad basically raised me during the Great Cultural Revolution when he was targeted as a Uyghur intellectual, and he didn't have a job after he was taken to re-education centers. So I love my father, but my father passed away 11 years ago. And I miss him so much. But can you imagine? I am so grateful that my father is no longer with us. He's not living in this world. I am so happy that he passed away. Imagine, is that the normal feeling? Because if he was, then he would have faced the same thing those millions of Uyghurs are facing in the dark dungeons of those concentration camps and being enslaved in the factories and the tormenting in somewhere, or if he was aged and if he was home, then he would have worried for his daughter, which is my sister, Dr. Rushan Abbas. So my husband too. He wakes up in the middle of the nights and I see him either crying or sitting and writing. I try to get it out of his chest. And we are not just an isolated family. We are just one example of all the Uyghurs in diaspora, almost all of them, even so-called the model citizens or never ever get involved with any kind of political situation, or just happy with the system the Chinese government was offering to Uyghur people. Even their relatives are targeted only because they are Uyghurs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask you just two questions? One, actually going back to 1989 and the time that you left the country. Was that I don't mean emotionally, because clearly there were family ties and everything, but was it difficult to leave the country at that stage? Were there obstacles in your way?
It was mixed feelings. As I said, I'm the youngest family, and I stayed in my family. Even I went to university by living in the house with my parents, not going to the university dormitory. But after graduating the university with the second highest score in the entire department, in the biology department, only because of my involvement for advocating for human rights, just asking for basic living rights for the Uyghur people, with Mr. Dolkun Isa and my friend who died just shortly after being released from the camps, Waris Abu Bakr. I was thrown onto the street with no job. Also, I was sent from the university to work, the educational ministry to work at the agricultural university, but later, because of my involvement in the political activities, I didn't have a job in Urumqi. So, and my father was feared for my safety, and I left. 3 weeks after I arrived in the United States, I witnessed, in June 4th, Tiananmen Square massacre. I watched this barbaric regime killing their own children, Han Chinese students, killing them at the Tiananmen Square. And how do you feel as someone whose homeland is being occupied, and ever since 1949, the Chinese regime is relentlessly using every opportunity, labeling Uyghurs in every names out there, like nationalists, counter-revolutionaries, and the separatists, and after 9/11 tragedy in the United States, terrorists. How do you feel about a government like that? Now they are basically hostage-taking my family members.
But your political activism, which one might have thought would have been a barrier to leaving, or being permitted to leave, that wasn't obviously a barrier. They still permitted you to leave, notwithstanding your activism at university.
Actually, right at that time, right after the Afghan war in the late 70s, until the Tiananmen Square protest, students' protest 1989, which I left 3 weeks before that. I came to the United States in May 1989. There was a period that many people say the golden times, like things are opened up. That's when I went to high school and university. We were able to have some books published, and the mosques were being built, and the Uyghur students were sent to abroad for studies and all that. So that was the period, I guess.
My second question goes back to the point that was discussed earlier about the detention of your sister and your aunt. And just to understand the sequencing of it, you'd been in the US for almost 30 years at that stage, and your sister and your aunt had not been the subject of any detention or police activities in that time. What was it about the Hudson Institute panel session that then, after 30 years of you being away and being an active political activist all this time, caused them then to detain your sister and aunt?
There's a few parts to that. One is 2008 Beijing Olympics. 2008 Beijing Olympics in Beijing, that was the confirmation from the West that the Chinese government can get away with anything, because they were persecuting the Uyghurs, persecuting the Tibetans, and the very oppressive policies for anybody who don't just worship the Communist Party, underground Christians and underground Catholics, or Chinese Democrats, or Southern Mongolians, and all that. So after 2008, the Chinese regime started to get more aggressive. So my last visit to my homeland was 2005. So I never went back after that. Then Xi Jinping came to the power. And after the Beijing Olympics, the Chinese regime is human rights basically took sharp U-turn and went back to the authoritarian policies, and also the Uyghurs started to face more and more about the forced sterilizations and the forced abortions, and the even only for the Uyghur people, not for the Han Chinese or anybody else. They had the policies that when you have your first baby, you cannot get pregnant until 3 years. You have to wait for 3 years in between. And that is also a way of affecting the Uyghur population, and the massive settlement of the Han Chinese people to the area, especially after Xi Jinping's announcement of the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013, which is one of the main reasons why the Uyghurs are facing genocide today. So that's why in 2014, they started to build the concentration camps and pick up the Uyghur people and sent there. And that's, I hope I answered your question. In 2018, my sister's abduction comes after all these, like Chen Chuanguo coming in August 2016, and then sweep off of Uyghur intellectuals and more than 1 million Uyghurs in April 2017.
When did you first find out then that your sister and aunt had been detained?
Last time I talked to my sister was summer of 2017. I stopped talking to her. As much as I love her, she's my only sister, especially after my mother passed away. She was like a mother figure to me. She's 5 years older than me. So I used to talk to her quite often. But after seeing what's happening in April 2017, I stopped communicating with her. But she has 2 daughters. As I said, I have 2 nieces in America, and they communicate with my sister all the time. And one of my niece, my daughter's youngest daughter, was pregnant. At that time, not even 8 months pregnant, but it's sort of like 3rd trimester, so she was talking to her mom all the time. And my other niece, Ziba, now she's also asking her mother's whereabouts. So Ziba just had a baby, actually. She had a baby in late May, so she had like a 3-month-old baby. So they were communicating with their mom on a daily basis. And last I heard from them was they panicked on September 12th, and said they cannot get hold of their mother. The last communication was the evening of the September 10, 2018. And first they thought maybe her phone was broken, or maybe she went someplace, didn't take her phone. So we waited for 5 weeks. But after 5 weeks, we did not hear anything. And then I started to become vocal about it. And then only later, actually, we find out that from our distant relatives from other countries, that my aunt was also seen on the September 10th as the last time the being connected with anybody, contacted with anybody.
And one last point. If at least part of the rationale for them arresting your sister and aunt...
I'm sorry, what is it?
If at least part of the rationale on the part of the PRC government in arresting your aunt and sister was to get at you, do they just assume that you will find out eventually and not make sure that you're aware that this has happened?
I really cannot tell what rationale they had in their mind, but the only thing I can think of is trying to silence me. And also, they try to show to the other people, if anybody dare to speak out about your missing relatives or anything, watch Rushan, see what we did to her sister. So I think that's the purpose, I would say.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for your testimony. We're running a bit short of time, so I'll give my quick questions. I assume you got a USA passport?
Yes, since 1995, I am a US citizen.
Apart from them obviously realizing what you're doing from social media, do you feel you're being harassed in other ways? Are people following you?
Well, I think, even I'm an American citizen, and I exercise my right as an American citizen under my constitutional right to exercise my freedom of speech and freedom of expression. I already paid the highest price that I could. Me speaking out, raising awareness, cost the freedom of my sister. So I don't feel fair about anything else anymore, because we have to keep doing what we are doing. So I hope that I am safe, because I am in the Western world.
Do you think they'd ever allow you in? And if they did, would they put you away?
Can you repeat that question?
Yes, sorry. If you applied for a visa to get into China, would they allow you in? And if they did, would you be fearful that you would be put into prison?
I never thought of going there. And I have been on the blacklist for a long time now. And so I don't think it's really wise for me to fly back to China.
I'm sure it isn't. I thought I'd ask. Another question. You've been quite involved with the associations. Do you know how many Uyghurs you've got in America?
You mean population of the Uyghurs in the United States?
Yeah.
I would say more than 10,000.
10,000. Mm-hmm. And would that be an underestimate because people would be frightened to join?
Yes, a lot of people are frightened to speak out, join our advocacy work.
And has your society, your group, met with or joined up with others around the world? So in other words, you've got a big number of people around the world. Have you sort of joining up?
You mean the Uyghur people around the world?
Yes, all the societies.
Yes, we have the umbrella organization, World Uyghur Congress, and led by our leader, Mr. Dolkan Issa. And we have a campaign for Uyghurs, which is the organization that I found and I'm the executive director of. But we all work together. We coordinate and collaborate together to raise awareness, to tell the world about this genocide.
How many do you think there are around the world?
The organizations or people?
People.
The Uyghurs in diaspora. That is a very good question, because it's difficult to estimate. I would say if you look at the Uyghurs who left East Turkestan after the lockdown of like a great cultural revolution, after the establishing the diplomatic relationship with the West, is about over 100 million easily. But if you look at the Uyghurs who left after the occupation of Chinese Communist regime in 1949, people who left to other countries, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, or later, before the Great Cultural Revolution, people left to Central Asia. So altogether, probably more than 500,000, I would say.
So I appreciate you've been raising the awareness to people about your situation. Have you approached the government and asked whether there are any other ways that they could help you?
Yes, we have been approaching people, grassroots organizations, students, and also international entities, and also the politicians and the governments around the world.
And do they allow charities in, such as, say, Red Cross or any other charities that work for people outside? Would they be allowed into China?
I'm sure they are allowed to go to China, but I don't know how effective they will be because of the information blockade and the orchestrated tours, because the Chinese government will never give free access without restrictions. Anybody who wants to go, they will set up places and they just take them to the setup, tour, even for those they call, so-called vocational training centers, which is the concentration camps.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Dolkanisa has testified that he was issued with, or Interpol was issued with a red notice, and indeed he has suffered interference at UN functions and so on in his advocacy. You've traveled extensively, you've advocated extensively. Have you had similar interference?
No, I have not.
Thank you.
You've been activist one way or another. Sorry, did somebody else want? No, you've been activist for a lot. Oh.
Could you tell me when you first said that what was happening was genocide? When you first publicly said that?
I wrote an op-ed on May 2019, and on my op-ed I wrote it was a genocide, but it was published as, I'm fighting slow motion of genocide. I have been saying that it is genocide since the summer of 2019, and I think in my first public speech and some of the interviews in Prague in early June, and there's in the Czech language, there's a article that I was calling all the countries who are signing up for supporting Belt and Road Initiative is complicit with China's genocide. So I would say that's the time.
Being an activist or even working on Radio Free Asia may have exposed your relations to some risk. Did you discuss or agree with them at all the risks that they might be exposed to?
You mean the Radio Free Asia?
No, your relations back in China. Did you discuss with them the fact that being an activist in the way you were might have exposed them to risk? No?
No, I'm sorry, I'm not quite understanding the question.
My mistake,
sorry.
no doubt. You've been an activist and a very vocal activist.
Uh-huh.
Did you discuss the risk to your relations by reason of your activism?
With my family?
Yeah.
No, never, ever. I am not. I know the situation. I lived there. I understand how all the Uyghur families, the phones, and any kind of communication is.
That's fine. We've got lots of evidence there.
Okay.
The other thing is, you've told us about various things concerning your 24 relations, houses, and so on. When you couldn't contact them yourself, you presumably went through other people and telephone calls, and maybe other people spoke to other people. If we think of those as layers of hearsay, secondary degree evidence, how many layers of hearsay would we be going through? Did you just ring one person and she went round to look at the house? Or did you ring one person and that person spoke to another person? Give us an idea.
On my sister's case, you mean?
On all of them?
Not anybody.
Just generally. I
generally.
want to have a picture of how you're able to give the accounts you have when it's what's called second-hand or hearsay evidence? But very briefly and just in summary.
Okay. No, actually, I am testifying for those, my friend and my colleagues, through the reports given by Radio Free Asia. And the Radio Free Asia Uyghur Service is doing amazing job. They get messages, tips from with like emails and text messages and the phone calls and the Facebook messengers, and then they Radio Free Asia Uyghur Service people, they follow up on the credible tips and the complete targeted verification calls, and they actually, Radio Free Asia Uyghur Service confirmed my sister's detention in June 2019. They also confirmed Mr. Doklan Isa's father's...
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. Any other questions? No? Thank you very much for coming and giving your evidence.